This is the JE Podcast, brought to you by Philadelphia Jewish Exponent and its parent company, Mid-Atlantic Media. Welcome to the Jewish Exponent Podcast. I am your host, Jared Safran. I am here today with TV and film producer and Jewish educator Todd Shotz. Todd recently produced the YouTube special called Recipe for Change, Standing Up to Anti-Semitism, featuring Adina Menzel, Ilana Glazer, and Moshe Kasher. And he won an Emmy Award for that, for Outstanding Daytime Special. He is also the executive director of the Jewish educational company Hebrew Helpers, which is a nationwide Jewish studies program that has become the go-to company for bar and bat mitzvahs on both coasts. Todd has recently been a part of the Netflix film You People, starring Jonah Hill, Eddie Murphy, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. He's been a consultant on Jewish representation in film and TV. He was also part of Grey's Anatomy. But most importantly, Todd is from the Philadelphia area. His family goes back a few generations. He went to an Old York Road synagogue growing up, right, Todd?
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I am, well, first of all, Jared, thank you so much for having me on, and I'm glad to get to know you. Always glad to get to know people from Philadelphia. And so, yeah, I'm fourth generation Philadelphian on my father's side and third generation on my mother's side. And so we have always been involved in the entire Philadelphia area, whether it was South Jersey or Philadelphia proper or the suburbs in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Elkins Park and went to Adath Jeshurun as our synagogue. We lived within walking distance, and
Still
I was
there?
What'd you say?
Still there?
It's still there. Yeah. I was there 2 weeks ago, doing a screening of Recipe for Change, and had a wonderful conversation with Rav Shai Cherry, who's the rabbi there. And
he actually did the opposite move as you. You've gone from Philly to California. He went from California to Philly. So there you go.
He did. Yeah. And we're dear friends. And so it was a really fun conversation to get to have in my hometown community. Yeah. I went to Cheltenham High School, proud graduate, year 92. And then I went on to University of Pennsylvania, and I'm the class of 96. And I was basically in Philadelphia for 22 years. And then I moved to Israel, and we can get to that. But Philadelphia, I'm probably in Philly between 6 and 8 times a year. I come back for the major holidays, lead my family's Seder. My parents actually have moved from our house in Elkins Park, where they lived for 39 years, and now live in Huntington Valley.
How would you say your Philly upbringing shaped you?
Well, it was everything. Yeah. I mean, growing up, living so close to our synagogue, and also the performing arts program at Cheltenham High School was so much a part that fostered my love of the arts and entertainment. And I've always had this dual life going on, which I know is something that you and I had talked about, that we wanted to talk about on this dual life between working in Jewish education and learning and Jewish culture and entertainment, the arts, theater, film, TV. And I was thinking about this actually coming on to the podcast today, about why these two fields seem to overlap in my life. As far as my interests, my skills.
They're not two fields that often go together. So I did want to ask you that. How did you become both, and how did you end up fitting them together?
Well, I think because in both areas, I get to work in building community, in telling great stories, in educating, in celebrating. And whether it's building teams of the mentors at Hebrew Helpers that work with me and my company, as well as creating these once-in-a-lifetime personalized communal life cycle events for the families that we work with, to then building production crews and creative teams in Hollywood, the skills and my interest and all that really overlaps. Yeah. And ultimately, everywhere I go, I get to tell great stories, right? And so I always say that about Jewish history and Jewish text, that it's all about the story. And so it's probably why Jewish people have always been drawn to Hollywood. And so I think but going back to like how this happened, I think this is part of your question. Working in both fields full time, I growing up in Elkins Park, right? I went to Hebrew school at AJ, was involved in the Torah Club, which was created by Kenner Charles Davidson, may he rest in peace, wonderful mentor to me. And where the older kids were teaching the younger kids to chant trope, to chant the Torah cantillation. And so I was teaching from 14 years old, teaching younger students to chant from the Torah. I was also involved in leading services. I was involved with USY.
Mhm.
And so then at the same time as I'm doing all of that at AJ, I'm involved with every theater production at Cheltenham, and I was going to performing arts camps in the summer.
So you've
So
sort of always been doing both then, going back to your teenage years.
it's really the case.
Yeah.
I dual passions. People always
Yeah.
say to me, "What do you really do?" And I said, "Well, I really do both, and I do both
Right.
as much as I can." Even at Penn, I was studying English and theater, but I also took 4 classes in Hebrew conversation. I took 2 classes in Jewish literature. I was performing with the Penn Glee Club, but also going to Hillel, right? So I was
Yeah.
always involved in both.
What
And
did you like about both when you first discovered those interests as a teen?
I think that I always loved the music. Music for me has always been a key part of my passions in my life, right? So musical theater, of course, and also singing with the different choirs. I sang with the choir at school. I sang with the choir at the youth choir at AJ, and then also within really within the teaching of the trope for teaching kids to read from the Torah. It's just amazing to be a part of a musical system that has been going on for well over 2,000 years. I always say to my students that the Torah reading is the oldest continuous ritual of sacred storytelling in the world. And so it's just incredible to be able to be a link in that chain of the tradition.
Yeah, definitely. And you went to Penn, you studied both. Did you continue to do both as you were there and as you graduated?
Yeah, actually, I was involved with almost every performing arts group as far as the theater component of that community, with Penn Players and quadramics and directing shows and then producing shows, as well as acting in them as well. And I think that's where basically by my junior year, I was doing mostly directing and producing. And I realized that that was a true passion for me because I enjoyed putting the project together. And that I think works both with creating a personalized bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah journey for a family, as well as creating a project from development to production to post-production and beyond.
Yeah. So once you graduated from Penn, did you feel like you had to make a choice, or did you always say, I want to keep doing both of these things?
Well, I had a lot of friends and family members who said, well, why don't you take a year to travel? Because I didn't go abroad during Penn because I loved it so much and I wanted to be there for every morsel of the semesters there. And so I spent a year in Israel after college teaching English in a program that, and what's interesting, at every opportunity though, even though I'm in Israel and I'm working on my Hebrew and my conversational Hebrew level, I would direct students at these local schools in English language productions of Free to Be You and Me, if you know that old production. Anyway, so and it was so I found that out that I directed the variety show at the kibbutz where we lived and we're doing ulpan. We were studying in the ulpan. So I again was the two interests. And when I came back to the States, I moved right to New York City and I got a job working in production on Broadway.
Mhm.
But I found that living in New York City was incredibly expensive, as I'm sure you know. And especially as a 22-year-old, almost 23-year-old, trying to figure it out and working in an entry-level job on Broadway was a great job, but I needed a sideline of some sort. And my mother, who I guess the moral of the story is always listen to your mother. She said to me, you have this skill of teaching trope and bar and bat mitzvah, and you love teaching. Why wouldn't you do a bit of that on the side and
Interesting.
get back to your dual passions? And so I did, and I started mentoring students in the village in bar and bat mitzvah preparation, sort of the precursor to Hebrew Helpers, because it started to get word of mouth, organically growing, and I needed to hire some other people. And so it wasn't Hebrew Helpers exactly. It was the preparatory phase before I moved to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And so
What was it like to work with bar and bat mitzvah kids, or soon to be bar and bat mitzvah kids? Because it's a pretty interesting age. It's a pretty formative age. That is a huge event for someone of that age. So what was it like to work with those kids?
Well, I'm still every week working with those students.
Yeah,
So
I
it,
guess what I'm asking is what about it kind of clicked at that point for
I
you?
think it was about the building of a project together where I was trying to do something special in those early days, which I think that we carried through to our work now, to my
Yeah.
work, to my other mentors who work for me,
Hmm.
is creating it more like a peer kind of learning, more Chavruta style, the traditional idea of Jewish learning, where you feel like it's two peers coming together to share ideas, to react off of text, to reflect on the past.
Yeah.
So in doing that, I it is really, it's more like that partner learning is so impactful to a student
Hmm.
rather than a lot of what they've experienced both in regular school and in their Hebrew school experience is usually just the teacher at the front and talking to them.
Yeah.
There's not the same type of engagement that you get from that type of partner learning. And whenever I start a process with a student, I always say, we're in this together.
Hmm.
The different kind of learning that you've ever gotten to do. We are learning for the sake of learning. Yes, there will be an ultimate service that we will do. It is not a performance. It is a celebration and a culmination of this learning.
Yeah. That probably gets through to them, right? Because
I
a
took the
lot,
pressure,
yeah,
took the pressure off.
yeah,
You know, I said it's we're
exactly.
doing this together, and I'm not going to make you feel bad if you didn't practice. That's not what this is about. This is about us building something together.
Yeah. And is that what you did then over time? Because you said this became Hebrew Helpers. You built up enough of a client base that you were able to turn it into something.
Yeah, well, I moved to I mean, Hebrew Helpers started in Los Angeles, so
Yeah.
I was worked on many Broadway shows over a 5 year period.
Yeah.
Amazing experiences working with some of my heroes on Broadway.
Mhm.
And then I went on the road for a year as the tour manager of a Broadway show. And it was during that year that I really saw the rest of the country and spent 2 months in Los Angeles. And my brother, Dan, who, of course, also grew up with me in Philly, and I'm actually the oldest of four. My brother, George, lives in San Francisco, and my sister, Annette, is in Philly with her husband and two kids.
Mhm.
And so my brother, Dan, had, and his high school sweetheart. They've been together ever since high school. They went to Germantown Friends School, and his wife Emily went to, now they're married.
Yeah.
Went to Penn with me. They had moved right from college, and so they were here. And my brother, I don't know whether you've been tracking his unbelievable success. He's the showrunner, the head writer, producer. Runs the whole show of Percy Jackson and the Olympians for Disney
Oh, wow.
Plus.
Yeah. Good
And
for him.
he also has another amazing show called The Old Man with Jeff Bridges and John Lithgow.
Hmm.
And so he's out here too. We live around the corner from each other.
Yeah.
And, so I came to LA with no job. I had been on the road for a year, so I'd saved up some money, and I started teaching bar mitzvah preparation all over LA.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I got a job working as an executive at Bruce Willis's production company. But then while I'm working full time, 40, 50 hours a week at the production company, and I'm teaching maybe 6 students on Sundays, I started getting so many calls from parents. It was amazingly overwhelming. I always say
Yeah.
and then I started hiring other mentors, and that's when Hebrew Helpers was born.
Yeah.
And it was
Okay.
really organic. It was an organic growth due to word of mouth, and now we're all over the country.
Mhm.
Hebrew Helpers is actually in 11 regions in the United States.
Yeah.
And Debbie Jaffe, who is my best friend since forming Hebrew Day School, which then was housed at Beth Shalom congregation right around the corner from AJ in Elkins Park. She runs the West Coast operation from Philadelphia.
Mhm.
Philadelphia is actually our East Coast hub. And now we've gotten the chance on the East Coast to work with hundreds of families over this past, I think it's about 8 or 9 years that we really expanded to the East Coast.
What do you think about it is about Hebrew Helpers that appeals to people?
I think it's because we create personalized B'nai Mitzvah services. And as I was mentioning to you before, that philosophy that I developed back in New York for really impactful learning with students caring about what they think and having those crucial discussions with them. This is such a pivotal moment in their lives in which their whole community is getting together, whether that's a private service community where it's their family and friends, or it's at their synagogue where they grew up. We're asking them what they think. We're asking to hear their voice.
Mhm.
And so it's organically grown so much because people come to one of our services, and so we don't advertise at all. It's all just from people either experiencing what we do or telling their friends. And we do services everywhere, from backyards to restaurants to the beach to and a lot of destination services.
Mm-hmm.
So of course Israel, and we're so looking forward to eventually being able to go back to Israel. I didn't get to go the past one trip, and now I'm unfortunately not gonna. I'm going myself this summer, but we don't have any bar mitzvahs planned at this time during the war. But we've done Israel, of course, so much over the past 15 years. Hebrew Helpers actually has been around for 19 years. We just had our 19th birthday last week. But we've done Prague and Shanghai and Venice and Crete and all these places that have such rich Jewish heritage, and it becomes a once in a lifetime kind of trip for the family.
Yeah.
I have actually a real Torah, like a full on Torah that fits in a backpack that I can put in the overhead when I'm flying around doing these services.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
So you worked in Broadway too back when you were in New York. You got out to LA. You worked for Bruce Willis's company. Yeah, how did you kind of build your career in that area too?
Yeah, so I was at Bruce Willis, and Arnold Rifkin was his business partner, who they built this company and made dozens and dozens of movies together. I was so thrilled to learn there, but I left in 2010. So I was there from basically 2003 to 2010, and I started my own production company after that. And some of it was due to, in part, that Hebrew Helpers had really started to grow, and so therefore I wasn't beholden to the salary at the production company. I could really chart my own course in projects that really spoke to me. And although I loved all of the projects that I worked on there, but some of them were horror movies and action movies and reality shows and these things that weren't technically speaking to my heart and what I hope to be my legacy in film and TV. So my production company that we started is really takes the chance to find those projects that are giving voice to marginalized voices, or documentary causes that I care about, whether it's for the Jewish community or for LGBTQ plus stories. And my business partner, Tim Kirkman, who's a wonderful writer, director, an Emmy nominee himself, he and I work every day together creating projects that we care about. And so we've gotten to make a lot of projects. And actually I was just in Philadelphia in November, at the very end of November, right before Thanksgiving, showing The Grotto, which is our latest feature film, written and directed by Joanna Gleason, who's the Tony Award-winning actress from Into the Woods. She's a huge film and TV actress for Crimes and Misdemeanors and Boogie Nights, and everybody will be looking her up when they watch this. But so yeah, Friends, The West Wing, she's in a lot of things. She wanted to make her writing and directing debut at 71. So you can imagine for Tim and me to have the opportunity to produce that, to give her that chance, it was incredible. And so she and I actually came to Philadelphia, and at Fringe Arts, that great venue, we got to show to my hometown crowd. Our last stop on the festival tour was in Philly, after a year of doing festivals and winning awards and all this cool stuff. That's and so it was hosted actually by the QFlix, the LGBTQ plus film festival in Philly, and the Women's Film Festival in Philly. And so they co-presented it.
What are some projects that you've done since 2010 that you're particularly proud of?
Probably the film that I'm the most proud of is called Lazy Eye. You can catch it. It's on all the major streaming services, Amazon, Tubi, iTunes, all those things. It was on Netflix exclusively for 2 years. But we made it back in 2016, and the business has changed so much over the years that like Netflix put it on for 2 years, and then it went off, and then it was on Amazon Prime. But Lazy Eye is a romantic drama with lots of comedic moments about a gay couple who reconnect after 15 years of not seeing each other. And it's a lot of talk about what do we see for our lives? What do we hope our lives will turn into? And so Tim wrote and directed it. It's just a beautiful, we shot it in Joshua Tree, which for those maybe not familiar is an incredibly beautiful desert region, very close to Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's cool.
Really proud of that. And then we made a documentary called Latter-day Jew that's about a gay Mormon comedian who converts to Judaism And when we meet him, he now wants to become a bar mitzvah. And this is all after he survived cancer. So it's a documentary, a real guy, unbelievable story. And that's now streaming as well.
Yeah.
So we've gotten to do some really cool stuff. I made a documentary about Sly and the Family Stone. We made a short film, Joanna's short film. That's a beautiful thing called Morning and Tonight. But what's amazing is as I'm doing this, my worlds have started to collide in a good way. They've started to overlap. And so many of my students' parents, of course, are also in the business. And so they've come to me and said, we have a Jewish character, or we have a Jewish storyline, or we have something that we need authentic and accurate consult on, to make it so that that'll be represented correctly. And that's where my work as a Jewish representation consultant has started to flourish.
Yeah. Have any good ideas come from that? From people saying, hey, what about this idea or this character?
Well, no, they're coming to me usually with a project that they're working on, and they're asking me
okay. Got it. Okay.
to consult on it.
Yeah.
But I do have a lot of Jewish projects that some of which I'm not ready to share yet, but that are coming down the pike. And my goal, and I'll just tease this right now, is that I'm planning to come to Philadelphia this summer to shoot a documentary short about an important project that's happening in the Jewish community.
Oh, cool. All right. There's the tease.
Yeah, there's a little tease. You'll have me back, Jared. Hopefully you'll have me back and we'll talk about that one.
Would love to. So so you're gaining connections and you're doing some consulting work on some films and TV shows. As we mentioned off the top, one of the recent ones was You People on Netflix, which came out a couple of years ago, starring Jonah Hill and Eddie Murphy. So you consult on Jewish representation in film and TV. Representation is a hot topic these days. What do you mean by that? Do you mean Jewish characters? Do you mean portrayals of Jewish experiences through those characters? Do you mean Jewish actors playing Jewish characters? Yeah.
That is a huge question. And so we'll start to unpack it. But You People was sort of the beginning of this for me, because I got a call from Kevin Misher, who's the producer of that and who went to Penn, and I worked with his kids for in Jewish learning. You People, actually, I believe it or not, you said it was a couple of years ago. It was only came out in January of 2023.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Time has we have
what
no
does that
idea
say about time in the 2020s. Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
So but it was shot actually in October of 2021.
Yeah.
Right while I was shooting The Grotto. I ran away for a couple of days. That film was a different story because I was not hired as the Jewish consultant on that film, even though there were a lot of articles that said I was the Jewish consultant. I was specifically hired as the Jewish technical advisor to help with one specific scene, which was the opening scene that takes place at a Yom Kippur service.
Right.
So they came to me because there were very few people with a Jewish background working on the project, and they wanted to make sure that they got it right and that it felt like an authentic Yom Kippur service at a reform or conservative synagogue that would be in a more of a ballroom at the Skirball Center, which is the big museum cultural center here. Because
I'm not actually that surprised to hear that they didn't have too many Jews working on that movie, because I don't know, some of the stuff didn't quite seem accurate to me. Like Jonah Hill's character's family, who is Jewish, they had servants, which I've never met a Jewish family that's had servants. Maybe really wealthy Jews in Los Angeles or other areas do, but I personally have never met one. So there was a lot of other stuff like that too that it just didn't quite seem right to me.
Well, the script was written by Jonah Hill and Kenya Barris, right? So they were representing their communities as they understand them to be, and that's all a writer can do.
Yeah,
is like create art from their own experience.
Yeah.
And, there were plenty of Jewish producers working on it.
Yeah,
but a lot of the design crew did not grow up with a Jewish background.
Got it. Okay.
They were the ones calling me and saying, can you help us with the production design for that scene, the prop design, the costume design? I also coached 254 extras to be able to participate in the vidui, the confessional prayer, where they're pounding on their chest, and then also there was one other little scene that I got involved with, which was where Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Rhea Perlman speak to each other in Yiddish. the scene got cut out of the movie, but it was one of the great experiences of my life working with these two comedic heroes, creating this scene. And I got really involved. Now I'm not an expert on Yiddish at all, but what they wanted me to do was I was able to find a Yiddish expert, Sarah Benor, who's a professor at Hebrew Union College, to consult on it remotely.
Yeah.
Because the reason that it's so perfect for me to be involved in this, because I understand how a set works.
Mm-hmm.
I understand how what everyone's roles are on a set. Mm-hmm. So I could go to the script supervisor and advise as to what take had the Hebrew pronunciation perfectly. Not for you people. I'm actually thinking about Grey's Anatomy, because Grey's Anatomy, that was an incredible experience. You people premieres in 2023. Mm-hmm. In January, and within a week I get a call from the unit production manager of Grey's Anatomy, who is a friend and someone who saw that there was a storyline coming down the pike in their season in which a bar mitzvah student is a patient. And he gets nervous in the CT scan and starts chanting his Torah portion for his upcoming bar mitzvah. And so they wanted to make sure that the Hebrew was going to be sung correctly. And so I was hired just for a day, basically. I mean, I met with him the day before, and I became fast friends with him and his mom, who, of course, was on set with him.
Yeah.
I made sure that he was all set. And so when he did 5 or 6 takes from different angles of him singing this one verse of Torah, which he did flawlessly, except for one take, he sort of mispronounced one word, and he was kicking himself because actors are so dedicated to getting it right. And he's really, now I think he's almost 15, or maybe he's already 15, but at the time he was like just 14, and he was really dedicated to his craft. Yeah. And so I went right to the script supervisor and said, make sure they don't use take number 2, because he did all other 4 takes perfectly, and that was just the one that had a little flub.
Right. So it sounds like representation then, when you work on movies and TV shows, means getting it right, getting these common Jewish experiences right down to the most minute details. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So when I'm considered the Jewish consultant on the project, like I am for Grey's Anatomy, that I'm reading the whole script.
Yeah.
I'm involved with the writers, the director, the design staff, the assistant director who's running the set, to enable the actors and the director to create something that feels authentic and accurate. Mm-hmm. And so what's interesting is that the Grey's Anatomy, I started on episode 14 of last season as just helping with that one moment. But while I'm there on set, the unit production manager pulls me into a production meeting and says, in our next episode, they just decided that he has to have the bar mitzvah on set. I mean, in the hospital, that he has to have the bar mitzvah in the hospital chapel.
Yeah.
I got to basically stage a personalized Hebrew Helpers kind of bar mitzvah in the chapel at Grace Sloan Memorial.
Yeah.
So then I was, all of a sudden, this 2-day thing became 5 weeks of working on the show.
Yeah.
To that scene, to figure out how it was going to work. And they were really responsive to my feedback as far as the rest of the arc of that character, as well as of his family, because there's a great grandfather who survived the Holocaust, and there was a lot to unpack for the actors and for the director and for the writers as they developed that storyline.
So can I ask you what you get paid to come in and be the Jewish guru on this stuff?
You never tell. No, so it was interesting. So it started off as an idea, like it'll be this many hours.
Yeah.
And then when it became a 5-week period, then it becomes more about a fee, right? Because we're taking a million phone calls and emails, we're working in production. So that same kind of thing happened to me on Recipe for Change, which I want to make sure we cover, because it's now, people can watch it. It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's a really important show that both celebrates Jewish culture as well as talks about the ways in which we can stand up to anti-Semitism and just identifying the issues that are facing the Jewish community. I was supposed to work as the consultant on that show for, I believe it was like 6 weeks in 2021 into 2022. and it turned into 6 months.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be the consultant, but that show, because it was so many moving parts and such a collaboration by this huge team of producers, they very quickly brought me on as the consulting producer. So I was actually had producing responsibilities in addition to being the one with the most Jewish knowledge on set and in the development of everything.
It's
And
interesting in Hollywood, there are these very specific roles, like when you're working on a certain project and you have to get it right, and you've sort of found a niche given your background and some of the other work you do.
and it's also a fine line. You're saying the roles, but it's also I have to do as much as I can to advocate for accurate representation, but
Yeah.
also I'm not the writer director. And so most of the times I'm not the producer. So I want to make sure that I'm helping them to ensure their vision and understanding my role in that and not stepping on toes. And it's very interesting because I think that there have been Jewish consultants in the past who were maybe professors or rabbinical folk or someone that was an expert in the field, but didn't necessarily speak the language of the set.
Yeah.
And so that's where I find myself in this unique crossroads. And I have to tell you, this has been such an incredible couple of years in trying to figure out how I can serve the Jewish community by making sure that we're, at least in the things that I'm trying to work on, that we're accurately represented. And it's and then to win an Emmy Award for working on a project after working in production for almost 27 years,
Yeah.
whether on Broadway or in film or in TV, and then to win for something that's about standing up to anti-Semitism and celebrating Jewish culture. Let's just say my parents are really proud.
Well, that's what we're all going for as Jews, right? Todd Shotz, thank you for joining us.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you, Jared.